Shooting B-RAW on the LUMIX S1ii is a fantastic experience. The footage looks stunning. And on top of that, we're also getting an incredible array of recording resolutions and frame rates, including 6K open gate, up to 60 frames a second in 5.9K, and up to 120 frames a second in Cinema 4K. We're also seeing some nice gains in dynamic range, especially in the highlights. This new implementation of B-RAW is well worth your time, and you're really going to want to stick around and watch this video because it brings a whole new dimension to using this already impressive camera. Let's get into it. So for those who don't know or might be new to this, shooting B-RAW basically involves using an external recorder, one of these, a BlackMagic Video Assist. You basically record onto that and you bypass all of the internal image recording capture process. So you skip all the internal image processing, noise reduction, sharpening, lens corrections, all that sort of stuff. And you capture it to a sort of near raw codec, which is B-RAW. So you get control over white balance and ISO even after you've captured the footage in post, stuff like highlight recovery, but you're also getting these additional improvements to image quality. You're sort of realizing the full potential of this camera, skipping all of the processing that LUMIX cameras force upon you when you're recording internally, and you basically get to choose how you process the image yourself. When you combine the fact that this also gives you increased dynamic range compared to internal recordings, as well as the ability to push the footage into a whole range of different gammas and color spaces, so you're not just locked into using Vlog, it's a very attractive proposition for a lot of people. As you can see, I shoot a lot of my BTS content on the iPhone, but as this is my first time owning one, I've been taking a bunch of classes on Skillshare to help me get up to speed on using it. So lately, I've been deep diving into all things iPhone on Skillshare, from filmmaking to photography classes, particularly this one from William Buckley on iPhone filmmaking using the BlackMagic camera app. It was really useful. And also the iPhone filmmaking class from Moment is also well worth a watch as well. So I think what's great is whether you want to cover the basics or level up your skills as a more advanced user, they have got you covered. But beyond that, there are classes for just about everyone, from marketing and video editing to photography and productivity. So whatever you're into, there's something for you. Plus, the first 500 people to use the link in my description or use my QR code will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. So what are you waiting for? Get started today. First thing you're going to want to do is make sure your S1ii and Video Assist are up to date to enable the RAW recording functionality. Then you're going to want to plug a high-speed HDMI cable into the camera and into the input onto the recorder. Then I would recommend using a fast SSD over USB from the recorder. And then you just enable the RAW output from the camera. In terms of B-RAW settings, I tend to always just record with constant bitrate, and then I just bounce between 8:1 and 12:1 depending on the project. And because I'm generally delivering to YouTube, that's the best sort of compromise between quality and file sizes. And then in terms of selecting your resolution and frame rate, you do that on the camera itself, not on the Video Assist, in the same menu that you would use if you were selecting internal recording options. The top resolution is a 6K 3x2 open gate, amazing, but you can also get a 5.9K 16:9 format. Both of those top out at 30 frames per second, and then at a 5.7K still full frame at 17:9, you can top out up to 60 frames per second, which is really useful. Again, full frame. So if you are in professional environments, being able to capture in that 17:9 aspect ratio up to 60 frames a second, I think is going to be really good news for a lot of people. So you have a 4.8K 4x3 option, which gives you up to 60 frames a second, which is great if you want to do higher frame rate anamorphic stuff. And that has a pretty reasonable crop. It's only about a 1.25x times crop, and it's a pixel to pixel crop. All of these will be pixel to pixel crops, by the way. And then in Cinema 4K, you can access up to 120 frames per second, and it looks fantastic. But you are having to contend with a bit more of a crop here. It's a 1.46 times crop, so you are squarely within that sort of Super 35 APS-C crop there. The lowest resolution is 3.5K, which again is in a 4.3 aspect ratio, and then that has quite a hefty crop. You're going just beyond APS-C Super 35. I think it's around a 1.7 times crop with that. So the thing I noticed immediately when reviewing this B-RAW footage is just the level of detail and clarity that this footage has. You know, the internal image on the S1ii is already really nice, but this just has like another quality to it. It's definitely more faithful, I think, to what my eyes see. You know, colors look very neutral and natural, and you know, you can see here just how the two images compare, you know, internal versus B-RAW. There are subtle differences to the way that they look. And it has a lot of latitude to play around with in post as well. But the best bit is that I just didn't really need to do too much to it to get it sort of where I wanted, to get the image singing. I'm actually developing a new vlog LUT, which I'm using here. So there really isn't a lot going on. It's just one LUT basically, and maybe a few exposure tweaks here and there. Let me know what you think of it. I'm hopefully going to put it on sale soon. I've got a few versions of it that I'm trying out. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. In terms of rolling shutter and stuff like that, I only really noticed issues with this in the 6K open gate, which is a bit of a shame. You know, if you're wanting to shoot anamorphic in this new resolution, just something to watch out for. It's probably not as bad as the S5 but it's not sort of leagues ahead. And then with the lower resolutions, I guess, you know, what we're seeing in B-RAW was comparable to the performance of the internal recordings as well. You also need to be wary that if you're using LUMIX lenses, the cameras apply a lot of lens corrections as well internally. You're not going to see that when you're shooting in RAW. Same with ProRes RAW as well. So you may find that your favorite LUMIX lenses look a little bit different when you're shooting B-RAW. So internally, the camera clips at around 4 to 5 stops of overexposure. B-RAW just pushes straight past that. Across the board, using B-RAW's highlight recovery feature, you just get way more highlight retention across the board, across all ISOs, whether using dynamic range expansion or not. And generally in my testing, I was seeing up to or over 5 stops of highlight recovery. So you could overexpose the image by 5 stops, more than 5 stops, and still bring it back, and it would look just fine as if you hadn't overexposed it, which is just absolutely incredible. And as you can see here, at 5 stops overexposed, it is clipped, but then once you use the highlight recovery option, it brings it back. So you're not really like magically recapturing the highlight information when you use this. My understanding is that the highlight recovery mode basically is an algorithm that kind of rebuilds the data. It is more of a predictive reconstruction of your highlights. But anyway, it gives you up to a stop more information. So even if you really mess up on your shoot, or you've got a shoot with like a ton of dynamic range, this is going to be a fantastic lifesaver and option. It just gives you so much more flexibility in post. It's a slightly different story when you're underexposing the camera. Noise creeps in quite earlier than it does the internal recordings. Like, the internal processing does a pretty good job of managing noise, I would say. It mitigates detail pretty well and noise pretty well. And it's only when you get to around 4 or 5 stops that you start seeing sort of heavy color shifts with the internal recording. So it shifts green. With the B-RAW, you don't really see that, but it is just inherently noisier. So you're gonna have to, you know, add your own noise reduction. And I think once you get to 4 or 5 stops, below that, most people will probably know how to get rid of it. At 4 to 5 stops, you probably need a bit more experience in dealing with noise in terms of mitigating any detail loss, adding sharpening, sort of dialing in your settings appropriately so you don't destroy the image. So let's have a quick look at how this new version of B-RAW compares to previous versions. So the S5 which had great B-RAW implementation, I think it's worth comparing to that. Straight out of camera or out of the recorder, the two images look very similar. There isn't a huge amount of difference I'm seeing here in terms of color or even in detail. Some minor differences, I suppose. I think the S1ii is maybe a little warmer. But if you look at the RAW tab, what's interesting is that the white balance and tint readings are not the same. They're not uniform or comparable between the two cameras. Even though the white balance in the cameras was the same, what we're seeing here is quite different. The S5 has by default a 25 tint applied to it, meaning that it's pushing way more magenta, and if I bring this down to 0, it's way more green. So I guess BlackMagic or LUMIX have used these values to somewhat correct and help provide some consistency across the images of these two different cameras. Okay, let's add the PYXIS 6K into the mix, which has the same sensor as the S5 As you might expect, it's using a different color space, different color science. Out of the camera, it looks quite different. It's a bit warmer, it's a bit greener. But if we go into the RAW tab and push the PYXIS footage into the same color space as our Panasonic, so V-Gamut and V-Log, and then we dial in the same settings as we saw in the S5 it's the same sensor after all, we do get something that looks much more comparable. So if you were matching the PYXIS with the LUMIX cameras, then you would definitely benefit from pushing the PYXIS into the Panasonic color space. In terms of noise, the S1ii maybe has a fraction more. It's just a little bit more present and noticeable, but the quality of it is very nice. And do remember, in terms of the PYXIS and the S5 for that sensor, when you really push it to underexpose it, it does show quite grungy, nasty, fixed pattern noise, which you just don't get on the S1ii. As you saw from the underexposure test, the S1ii has very uniform, consistent noise and grain. So this is a big deal. For the first time, I'm shooting in full sensor, open gate, and capturing externally in BRAW with some new anamorphic lenses from S1ii. You still get anamorphic IBIS as well when you're recording onto BRAW. LUMIX have always been great for giving us internal open gate recording functionality, but it has come with some caveats, right? It was a 10-bit file, but it caps out, at 420. But now we're able to make full use of the chunky full-fat BRAW codecs, whatever compression ratio you want. Now, I guess there are still some caveats. It's going to be the slowest sensor readout speed. If you are bothered by that, it's still probably going to be better than the S5 IIX. And of course, you are only limited up to 30 frames a second in this recording format. If you want higher frame rates, you can crop into the sensor in terms of capturing B-RAW, or you can just opt to shoot internally up to 60 frames a second in that 5.1K open gate. So I think it's great that this B-RAW implementation is not just an afterthought, not just a marketing gimmick. They really are evolving it and giving us new features. And I think a lot of people really wanted this feature to be able to record open gate over HDMI into B-RAW. So it's fantastic to finally see it. There is some monitor delay. It's not as bad as we see on the S5 IIX, and you can still improve it further by disabling audio over HDMI. So if you're not bothered about audio, or you're recording audio separately, that's probably the way to go. But I think overall it's fine. What's awesome is that autofocus tracking is available across all of the modes apart from Cinema 4K shooting in 100 or 120 frames a second, which is fair enough. You're still getting the excellent face detect autofocus system here in the higher frame rate mode. You're just not getting that sort of active tracking behavior. So it's perfectly usable, and it's fantastic to see the maintenance of the autofocus tracking system across all of the other modes, including 6K open gate. So the B-RAW that comes from this camera is obviously beautiful, but it is very sharp, and some people might find that problematic. The camera doesn't have an optical low pass filter, so it's not smoothing out some of those high frequencies, which can be quite flattering to skin tones and to people. Now, there are things you can do to mitigate that. You can shoot with vintage glass, softer lenses, shooting with diffusion filters, stuff that you can use in camera to soften up the image, and then obviously playing around in post. You can see here I've applied some effects to help soften up the image, and what I'm adding here is stuff like reducing the mid detail in DaVinci Resolve, adding some blur, adding stuff like highlight bloom. If you want to use the film look creator in Resolve, you can mess around with the image there, or if you've got like your own favorite film emulation plugin or power grade, a lot of these will have some sort of image softening node built into them. Ultimately, I'm pretty confident that I can get the image where I want to in post with these solutions. Yes, absolutely. Of course, there is internal ProRes RAW, but for me, there are so many limitations on using that, especially for professional projects, that it's just not that attractive to me. You have limited resolutions, limited frame rates. Even if you can get past those, I can't pull ProRes RAW natively into Resolve, and I've got to do a bunch of workarounds, converting it, pulling it in. It's just not something I can see myself wanting to do on a weekly basis for my professional projects. It's a completely different story for B-RAW. About the only program you can't use it in is Final Cut, I think. There are so many compression options, resolutions, frame rates, that it's just much more attractive for professional projects. Just testament to LUMIX and BlackMagic. They've done a fantastic job here. I think what I really, really want to see now is them come together and give us internal B-RAW recording on their next camera. So if we're going to be seeing some sort of S1H successor and S1H2, some sort of video-centric camera, I really just want to see internal B-RAW. I would love to skip the step of having to sort of cart one of these around. Just have one camera, one box that can shoot compressed media and a RAW codec together and have the same options of frame rates and resolutions available. I work on a range of different jobs, and at the moment I'm jumping between using these hybrid mirrorless cameras for smaller jobs where I want to shoot compressed media, and then using cameras like the PYXIS and the Komodo where I want to shoot RAW. Neither of these cameras can give me compressed and RAW at the same time. So please, LUMIX, smash those two style of cameras together and give me a camera that gives me that. because then I can just use it on every kind of job I have, and that would be fantastic. It would just save me a lot of hassle. Love to know what you think about it. Are you going to be shooting B-RAW on these new cameras? We've recently seen the new updates allowing 8K B-RAW for the S1ii Mark II. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see a video on that. But thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing if you're not. Please like the video if you enjoyed it or it was useful. I'm Ed, and until next time, I'll see you later.